Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I have so many cool video ideas coming out. I am just tearing through all of my indie book reviews, and I'm going to do a lot more vlogs, and I am actually going to do a really fun special video for my 100th indie book review. It's awesome. I've got so many plans. The problem is that because I've been focusing on all of these plans, I totally forgot to think of things for my standard Saturday uploads. So what do I do when I've totally forgotten that I have a Saturday upload coming? Random rambling discussion on a bookish topic that I kind of just pull out of thin air, or at least something that I've been thinking about for a little bit now. And today we're discussing why love triangles suck. Now I get it. This is not a hot take. I am not breaking open new ground here. Love triangles in themselves, especially in the online bookish community, are one of those artistic things that you either love or hate. And what the general consensus leans towards can change, especially depending on, if there's been a major hyped book that has a love triangle inside it. So we're going to first real quick go over what a love triangle is, because they're not actually triangles, and that bugs me. So the kind of love triangle I am talking about today is the love triangle in which a single character of one gender or sex has to basically choose between two characters of the opposite sex. And this is the most standard form of love triangle, in which they will choose one of the two options. There is no polyamory involved, and it's usually very, very heteronormative. I have not yet read a book with more queer love triangles, either one that ends in polyamory, which honestly is the one I want, or one in which all three of the participants are the same gender, thereby making it inherently a same-sex relationship regardless. So I'm not talking about that. But low-key, if you have those recommendations, please put them in the comments below, especially if they're indie. But today I'm going to talk about exactly why I'm not the biggest fan of love triangles, because I have specific reasons, and maybe talk a little bit about whether or not polyamory as the ending would work or not for the general setup. Because here's the thing, love triangles aren't just a trope that I'm not the biggest fan of. They will honestly turn me away from a book if I even sense that it could happen from reading the synopsis. You know, that kind of synopsis where they talk about how, oh, this princess has to join the rebellion, and there's, her bodyguard mentioned in the synopsis, but also the leader of the rebellion, and you kind of can tell right then and there, okay, that's what we got. And I will read that and be like, oh, no, not reading this book. Or I will start a series, and if I get the gist in the first book, because you really can tell. Love triangles never come out of nowhere. You can always see the build-up for them. If I sense in this series that a love triangle will be forming, I will have to really love the book itself to continue reading. But more often than that, that's enough to, knock off a start. Oh, love triangle coming. But I do have my reasons for it. One of the biggest ones is that it is almost impossible to do them well. And what I mean by that is it is almost impossible to make the readership of that book be equally invested in both of those relationships. The MC's relationship with, let's be honest, usually one of them is the brooding bad boy, and usually one of them is the golden-haired good boy. And of those two, have you ever read a book with that premise and ever thought, oh, maybe she'll end up with the golden-haired good boy? No, you never do. If it's YA, especially YA from the 2010s or late 20-teens or 20-aughts, she's ending up with a bad boy. No question. And probably one of the best instances of this does have to be Twilight. Does anyone in their right mind, did you think for a second that Jacob Black honestly stood a chance with Bella? Did anyone honestly think that girlfriend was gonna leave the vampire for the werewolf that wasn't even a major player in the entire series until book 2? Because yes, he was in book 1. He was a tiny little blip of a side character in book 1. He did not become a major player until book 2, and book 2 is everyone's least favorite anyway. But that's kind of the point of this, is that whenever you start a love triangle with these two together, or a growing relationship, and then introducing a second character, very rarely does that second character ever actually end up with the protagonist, and most of the time you can guess really early on which one she ends up with. And I know I'm saying she a lot, but a lot of the love triangles I have in my head are a girl choosing between two guys, because that's just, more prevalent, I think, in YA than the opposite. But in most cases, it's usually the main couple, hetero, with like one add-on that like kind of tries to interfere, but like everyone knows it's going nowhere. It just doesn't work. It's not really a love triangle. It's like, well, I don't know what you call it, like a line and a dot. It's not the same. And I mean, love triangles aren't actually triangles because, if it was a triangle, there'd be a relationship between the two romantic rivals. And sometimes there is, like, if they're siblings or really close friends or, like, I don't know, business associates, you can kind of make a case for there being a third line. But most of the time, it's a love angle. My next struggle with a love triangle is the fact that books, especially books that aren't romances, don't have a lot of time to grow the romance in the first place. Your romance in your standard like fantasy or sci-fi or what have you is usually the subplot as it is, which means it already gets less quote unquote screen time, or I guess, books, you could call it page time. So having a love triangle and trying to do it well, you are halving or cutting that in half the time you have for any one of those romantic relationships, because now you have to try and equally divide it between two different people. And I am a slow burn girl. I do not like quick insta-lovey or insta-lusty and they somehow call it love type relationships. I need the slow burn. Like, if I'm reading a series and there's a relationship beginning in the first one, I don't even want to see them kiss till at least the end of book 2, maybe even midpoint in book 3. Like, I love the yearning, and trying to build yearning for two separate people at the same time, it just doesn't work. You inherently have to kind of speed things up to make it happen in a way that you can honestly believe that both of these romantic interests are a viable option for the protagonist. My next struggle with this one is how it low-key always makes the protagonists look kind of bad. They always look indecisive, and normally that's not that big of a deal. I'm a big fan of like introspective, who am I type sub-themes. The problem is that when other characters' like emotions are wrapped up in it, it makes them look worse. It makes the main character, the protagonist, look like someone that's just stringing these other people along and letting them, hang in limbo because they can't make up their mind. So it's a really big struggle for me to honestly say that, I relate to them, because love triangles inherently aren't necessarily something most people relate to. I don't think a lot of people in their regular daily life have had like two romantic interests that they were equally invested in, vying for their attention at the same time. And that might be part of the allure of a love triangle, the idea of being so wanted that these two hot people want you desperately and you have to decide. Like, maybe that's the thing that people are interested in, but honestly, if I was forced to make that kind of decision, I would just be anxious. And low-key, I'm a fairly decisive person, and I don't turn away from my decisions I've made them. So like, I would be like, okay, this one, bye. Like, but again, maybe that's just me. My final reason against love triangles is a very particular one for a very particular set of circumstances. And I get the idea or the use of the love triangle in this instance, and it's a fairly clever concept that doesn't necessarily stand up to deeper introspection. So let's say you have a protagonist and they have to make a life decision. Whether it's, contemporary, do they stay in this career or they switch? Or more often than not, it's usually some kind of what faction do they join? Maybe they're part of the ruling upper class, but there's this growing rebellion. And there is a romantic interest that kind of symbolizes both sides of that. Let's go back to our princess and her bodyguard and the rebel leader. So the rebel leader represents the princess leaving her regular life behind to join the rebellion against the bad things, and the bodyguard represents her sticking with the life she knew before and propriety and all that. And again, I feel like in that instance, you know who she's gonna pick. But regardless, this idea of love triangle as metaphoric or symbolism for the decision the main character has to make, in theory, sounds like a good use of it, right? Now it's not just, oh no, she's got two hot dudes, the bodyguard and the rebel leader vying for her. Now it's choosing the guy is symbolic of choosing her path in life. The problem with that is that often it comes across like she picked that path because of the guy. Like, it so often feels like the guy comes first or the romantic interest comes first, and that's why she picked that life, which cheapens it immensely. In a lot of cases, I've read books where I would have rather there'd been no romantic interest so that her decision, and again, I'm using the word her as a protagonist, but I'm thinking of so many like YA dystopians that were so prevalent in the late aughts, early 10s that like included all of this kind of thing. But my point is that like it waters it down to what should be a major decision made purely based on what is the right decision for the character personally, or for, values, or for the themes the book is trying to get across, now is mighty based on which does she like more? Like, who guy's the hotter bad boy? Like, it waters it down a lot. And if you've honestly read a book in which this is done well, in which the love triangle truly is symbolic and it is very poignantly obvious that she would have made the decision she made regardless of the dude involved, or again, the protagonist would have made the decision they made regardless of the romantic interest involved, please recommend those to me. I would love to read them. Although, I take that back. Not love. I would be more interested than usual to read a book with a love triangle. Let me not oversell myself. But in general, it's a cool idea in theory, but again, one of those things that's impossible to do well enough to actually pull off and, well, to be honest, justify the trope in the first place. So then let's look at the big option that a lot of people say, and I am in the camp of, if it doesn't end in polyamory, I don't want it. But to be fair, I accept that in a lot of cases that wouldn't work, and I don't want to push polyamory or a certain specific sexuality as the quote-unquote correct option, because that's just opening a door to a very ugly world we should not be opening doors to. But in general, I think there is something to be said for queerifying the love triangle trope, because there is something so insidiously heteronormative about this entire trope, because again, very often it is a protagonist choosing between two characters of the opposite sex that would make it a straight relationship, and it is very much focused on monogamy as the only option. Often it never occurs to anyone to have a conversation of maybe monogamy wouldn't work. I haven't even seen that done. Like, I would even give a love triangle bonus points for that if they even at least had the conversation of, could we make non-monogamy work, and then decide, no, we couldn't, for reasons beyond heteronormativity. But I do think that we need to look into polyamory as more of an option, especially for certain books where the best one that comes to mind is Cassie Clare with, I'm going to forget names, I read those books so long ago, the Tess, Jem, and Will love triangle, where Jem and Will were already really close and were both like, no, you be with her throughout the entirety of at least the books I read. I didn't finish that trilogy. But again, it's like, why couldn't like a low-key polyamory have worked in that situation if everyone had love for everyone else? And yeah, Jem and Will's love wasn't romantic, but like I could totally see them being okay with being paramours for the same girl. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where it's such a given that monogamy and heteronormativity has to be the end goal that this is even drama in the first place. So maybe a little bit more of a insight or an investigation into how love triangles reinforces heteronormativity to disquieting extents, let's say. And in general, if you do like love triangles, you love the drama, and you genuinely have that, ooh, who are they gonna pick feelings towards them, valid. Again, this is one of those tropes where the general consensus tends to be divided. It's not a hot take, but it's also not necessarily majority opinion. It depends on who you're talking to, and if you like it, have a ball. There are tons of love triangle stories out there, so obviously someone must like them because they get written in mass. For me, I need to know that my main character will not be stringing anyone along, and that every decision they make, for the most part, is made because it is the decision they think they should make, or if they make a decision because of a love interest, that's shown that that's not an entirely viable way of making decisions. But regardless, I have been rambling on for long enough, and thank you so much if you've sat through all of this. I would love to hear your thoughts on love triangles below. Do you think they're awesome? Do you hate them? Are you just, they're there? Either way, thank you so much. I hope to have some more vlogging and indie book fun moving forward. Like I said before, I am coming close. I have actually already read my 100th indie book for review. I just have not filmed it as of filming this, and I've got a lot of fun stuff coming on. I've got vlogs coming on, and I've also got to work on my NaNoWriMo next month. But this has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for the third time. With nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.